Good. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, while we are enjoying these amazing moving drawings, let us start the 2 academic minutes in times of virtual events, but there are already many people connected. So let us start on time. A wonderful good morning, afternoon, evening, and welcome to the closing session of our Global Forum for National Trade Facilitation Committees 2022. My name is Jan Hoffmann. I'm head of the Trade Logistics branch at UNCTAD's Division on Technology and Logistics. Before starting the concluding high-level session, let me provide you with a few logistics details. And while I explain the logistics details, we will in parallel launch a little poll for you to give us feedback about this 4-day forum. It is always risky to ask for feedback live because we do not control the answers. Honestly, we do not control. So here comes the first question. Have you found this forum useful to update your knowledge and skills on NTFCs? While you answer this question, which we hope is not a difficult question, so while you do the multitasking to answer this poll, here are 3 quick logistics items for your information. First, interpretation. And I was reminded to speak slower. The session has interpretation in English, French, and Spanish. You can choose your preferred language by pressing the globe icon at the bottom of the screen and choose the language you wish to listen to. Second, about who can speak. Only panelists are able to speak during this session. Today, in this concluding session, we do not have a Q&A. However, if you have any question, you can still raise it by using the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen and write your question. We will monitor the questions and answer them to the extent possible, or possibly get back by email. Not promised, but we promise we try. Third point, the drawings, which we already enjoyed during the introduction. We had a drawing artist working with us, illustrating each session. We will just show you his work for the past sessions, and we will show you the last drawing of the closing session before we leave. All drawings will be uploaded also on the website. So these were the 3 quick logistics issues. For more information, see also the chat function at the bottom of the Zoom screen, which you find by pressing the speech bubble on Zoom. And you can also find additional information about the dedicated, about our event on the dedicated website, which you can access through the UNCTAD welcome page. There you have the program, information about the speakers, and after this week, after these sessions, also the proceedings, copies of speeches, presentations, the drawings, and recording. So that was regarding the various logistics questions at this point of time. So I believe I now have the option to click share results, and we can, I believe, now all see your honest answers. Thank you so much. The vast majority agrees. Nobody disagrees. Some partially agree. It's a glass half full, half empty. But I promise this is your answer, not our pre-recorded. Really, please, it's your answer. So this was the closing session. Thank you all very much. I will now do stop share the results, and then we will start with the concluding with the knowledge insights shared by our colleagues and panelists. So I do stop sharing. I hope, okay. There we are, it should now be all right. We just go through our fantastic speakers. I will introduce them one by one as they speak. Our first speaker is Elizabeth Türk. He is the director of the Economic Cooperation and Trade Division at the UNECE, the UN Economic Commission for Europe. Prior to that, Mrs. Türk was actually a colleague here at UNCTAD, and we will not hold it against her, chief of the section on international investment agreements in the UNCTAD Division on Investment Enterprise. Her earlier professional activities included functions in UNCTAD's Division on International Trade and Commodities, in the Geneva office of the Center for International Environmental Law, and in the World Trade Organization. We have a long-standing, ongoing collaboration with the ECE-TF team, including in our ongoing joint project on trade and transport connectivity in times of pandemic. Very happy to have you with us, Elisabeth. The floor is yours.
Many thanks, Jan, for this introduction. And let me start to say that I'm really delighted to be part of this global event, and also congratulate you, Jan, and colleagues for a really impressive forum that you have launched here. And I really enjoyed the cartoons, the drawings. As you said, like also in UNECE and particularly at the Economic Cooperation Trade Division, we very much value the partnership with UNCTAD. And I'm particularly delighted that our executive secretary, Ms. Olga Algayerova, she opened the forum on Tuesday, and it's a great pleasure for me to be participating in this closing session here today. I thought for the closing, I'd like to share three themes, three streams of thought. And I'd like to put a disclaimer here because I'm really not attempting to do any summary. I could not do justice to this sort of like very rich debate that you had over these past days. And when I make my remarks, I will draw upon the long-lasting role of UN-CFACT. UN-CFACT is one of UNECE's normative entities, and in fact, it's the designated focal point for trade facilitation recommendations and electronic business standards in the UN system. So at UNECE, we are very proud to host and service UN-CFACT, and in fact, that work goes back under a different name until the 1940s. So it's really been a long-lasting normative development here at UNECE, creating recommendations, guidelines, white papers to support also today the implementation of international obligations like the WTO TFA. Now, there are also some cutting edge things happening in UN-CFACT, and Jan, you already alluded to our joint project, so I'd say a few words about that as well. Now, what are my three themes or three streams of thought? The first one is really about multi-stakeholder engagement. And I think it is one of the key takeaway messages from the discussions you've had to see this paradigm shift from what has been a more isolated view of trade facilitation to something that is much more a whole of government approach. And it's maybe also a bit a change of mindset. It's a change of mindset from more controlling to client-centered approach. I guess this came up multiple times in the debates. That's also something reflected in UNECE tools in our recommendation 4 on national trade facilitation bodies. Most recently in 2015, where we very much recognize the importance of private membership in national trade facilitation bodies or committees. And actually, we recommend that private sector participants in these bodies should include representatives from all industry sectors, all types and all sizes of businesses, so manufacturers, importers, exporters, customs brokers, but also maybe SMEs and maybe also female SMEs. And I think we've had a very rich discussion about gender dimension of trade facilitation in your forum. Now, if we take this forward, the NTFCs, they can really turn into breeding grounds for public-private partnership for trade facilitation. And again, that's something we look at in UNECE, and we will particularly looking at that in our forthcoming white paper that is about encouraging private sector participation in national trade facilitation bodies. Now, public and private sectors, they might have different priorities. They might have different perspectives on policy issues, on risks. And that's why it's so important to build trust between them. We really need to build trust, and that can very much be done also by improving understanding each other's priorities. And again, the NTFCs, they have an important role to play here. They can be a platform for dialogue. And that's really something where also we have tried to look at UNECE a little bit, in particular at our recommendation number 40, again from 2015, which is called about consultative approaches and best practices in trade and government consultation on trade facilitation matters. So this recommendation lists 6 basic principles to be made for trade facilitation consultation approaches to be effective, and that includes partnership and trust, transparency, managing differences in opinion and interests, results orientation, consultation as an iterative process, and also accountability and responsibility. Now, if we look at that from an inclusiveness perspective, let me flag again that women representation and SME representation is really, really important. We see that this is still relatively low in some NTFCs, but it's important that we sort of boost that and that we also look at the 6 principles from that perspective. So that was the first theme. Let me move to the second theme. Monitoring reform, tracking progress, and the like would be the second theme for me to pick. It's clear that that's a focus for the NTFCs, tracking the results and the progress in trade facilitation reforms. And I think we've talked about that the results achieved should be documented, communicated regularly. In an ideal world, you use real case examples about the benefits for the private sector. And I guess that in the forum, many benchmarking and measurement tools were discussed, all of them very, very relevant. And that includes the Global Survey in Digital and Sustainable Trade Facilitation. Again, from UNECE perspective, we are delighted to be part of that. The reform tracker, the OECD trade facilitation indicators. And so there are lots of tools, and clearly the NTFCs are very well placed to make use of these tools and monitor also the country performance. For me, it was particularly interesting that in 2017, new topics were added to the global survey, new topics such as SMEs, sustainability, and gender. And I think that shows an evolution. And in that manner, also the role of the NTFCs can evolve. Implementing the WTO TFA is really an important step, but continuing reform efforts in line with these new objectives, sustainability objectives, Agenda 2030, circular economy, all of that calls for continuous engagement of the NTFCs. And if we take that a step forward, we are not counting and documenting trade facilitation reforms for the sake of trade facilitation reforms. What really interests us is the impact of that on real world development outcomes on the ground. The development impacts, the sustainability impacts. And again, NTFCs are very well placed to taking a leadership role in that. And they can really help mainstreaming trade facilitation into national development strategies. Again, there are tools for that. For example, trade facilitation roadmaps. It's an instrument that provides a time-bound vision and prioritizes activities. And in UNECE, we've done some work on that with countries like with Greece, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan most recently. Now, in all of that, we need to ensure that the NTFCs, that they are well resourced, that they can deal with all these challenges, and that they can really also respond to these new expectations. And that this also happens once sort of the key obligations of the WTO TFA per se have been implemented. This call for resources and continuity is made strongly in one of our forthcoming white papers that I mentioned before. And so we really place emphasis on sustainability in terms of resources for the NTFCs. Now, briefly, the third theme, digitalization. It's a fancy and hype topic. And for UNECE, it matters a lot because at our 670s Commission forthcoming, member states have decided to look at digital and green transformations. Clearly, digitalization was really relevant during the pandemic, and many speakers during the forum also referred to it, referred also to the growth of e-commerce and the challenges in managing all these large numbers of small parcels shipped around the world. Now, the NTFCs, they need to put attention in addressing these challenges and on embracing digitalization. Clearly, there are new technologies such as blockchain and artificial intelligence that can help, that can bring benefits, but they also can bring challenges. And I think it's very important to have an informed approach to what is a really complex new topic of digitalization. And one thing that comes out of the discussions is that when we talk about adopting digital solutions, that this must be based on international standards to ensure harmonization, to ensure interoperability of digital systems. And again, that's where UNECE and UNCFAC can come in. We have lots of recommendations and electronic business standards that were developed exactly for that purpose of harmonization and standardization. And here I'm really proud to mention that we have just finalized a package of standards for digitalization of key documents accompanying the goods transported across different modes of transport, rail, road, water, and air. And we've just finalized this publication of this package of standards 2 weeks ago. And I really am delighted that we could do that under the joint project with UNCTAD. And I would like to call on all participants and partners to look at this package of standards. We are now doing the first pilots to test the standards in a real world multimodal transport operation setting. And I very much look forward to working with you all to rolling out this package of standards in different countries, in countries with economies in transition in the UNECE region, but also beyond in the global south. Now to close, the world is changing, it evolves, and I think we all have to adapt to changing trading contexts, and this is also very important for the NTFCs. In my intervention here, I've flagged 3 areas where things have evolved and that were discussed in the forum. That was firstly, multi-stakeholder participation. Secondly, tracking impact and performance. And thirdly, digitalization. And what is clear is that the challenges are big, but the benefits are promising, and that there is a role for international organizations in supporting the NTFCs in meeting these challenges and harnessing the benefits. And I guess in international organizations, IGOs, we also need to look at the future, and we need to look at relationships across topics. And there is one thing that comes to my mind, and that I didn't see so much being discussed in the forum, but it's a seed I would like to plant with all of you. Namely, if we look at the WTO, last week there were discussions about investment facilitation. And last week also UNCTAD launched a monitor about investment facilitation policy monitoring. And it might be important to look at these interactions, trade and investment, they are intrinsically linked. When we look at countries' integration into global value chains, we need to look at both trade and investment. And when we look at the themes that are being discussed in the trade facilitation and investment facilitation, we see certain commonalities. Transparency, simplifying and speeding up procedures, dialogues between governments and investors, special and differential treatment, technical assistance, and capacity building. We understand the 2 themes are very different, but it might be interesting to explore the interaction and the interlinkages. So this is just a thought for the future. National Trade Facilitation Committees, they matter, they are relevant today as much as in the past. They need to deal with many novel challenges to ensure that we reap all the expected development benefits. And it's been a great pleasure for UNECE and particularly for the Economic Cooperation and Trade Division to work closely with our partners in UNCTAD, ITC, ESCAP, other UN agencies, international organizations, and also the WTO to support NTFCs and UN member states more broadly. So we're very delighted to continue this cooperation. And once again, to Jan and the team, congratulations for pulling off such an amazing event and for making it interactive and interesting and really nice to follow. And many thanks again for having UNECE be part of this exercise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for these insights and not just this intervention, also the collaboration we are having. Yeah, you highlighted your key points about the private sector participation, the tracking, sustainability, digitalization, and a lot of these were discussed. And you mentioned also from your background, you come from UNCTAD's investment division. In fact, the trade information portals that we are using, the methodology, was initially developed for investment facilitation in a way. And you know, we work very closely with your ex-colleagues, still UN colleagues, because in a way, you're right, to facilitate setting up a new business, to facilitate cross-border investment flows, cross-border trade, the methodology is very much the same. And a little sales pitch here for this tool, where we also work with you, we work with ITC, and it's always the same thing. You document and make transparent the steps that are necessary. And by doing so, you also identify ways and means to improve and to reduce the number of steps. Cool, thank you very much. We have to move on. So our next speaker is Jan Duval from the UN Regional Commission for Asia and the Pacific. Jan is Chief of the Trade Policy and Facilitation Section at UN-ESCAP. Over the past 20 years, he has conducted research and delivered technical assistance and advisory services on trade and development throughout Asia and the Pacific. Since joining ESCAP, he spearheaded the creation of the ESCAP World Bank Trade Cost Database, as well as the UN Global Survey on Digital and Sustainable Trade Facilitation. Over the past 10 years, he also led the ESCAP Secretariat team supporting the negotiation of a new UN treaty on the facilitation of cross-border paperless trade in Asia and the Pacific, which entered into force in 2021, and where we in UNCTAD are also happy to have supported and promoted this initiative. So it is very, very late right now in Bangkok. While we now invite Jan Duval to speak, you might realize that it is a pre-recorded speech, which I trust Sergio and teams will now share with you in the share screen. Please, Jan Duval video, you have the floor. Okay, we did receive it, we did test it. We still have time. If this doesn't work right now, if I get a little note, we would move on, and I would warn Dr. Said to come quickly back from it. No, there it comes. Please, Jan Duval, you have the floor.
So thank you again, UNCTAD, for organizing this year's Global Forum for National Trade Facilitation Committees. ESCAP was really pleased to collaborate with you and all the other partners in this important event. So in the few minutes I have for closing remarks, I'd like to say thank you in particular to all the officials from NTFCs who took the time to share their practical experience with others on advancing trade facilitation. I thought this was particularly valuable and interesting. I would also like to invite all NTFCs to take advantage of the tools we have developed at ESCAP that are relevant not only to Asia Pacific, but also to a large extent to the rest of the world. So for monitoring and benchmarking, I think you are all now aware of the UNTFsurvey.org website, which covers a wide range of measures for 144 countries since we launched the global report by all the UN regional commissions during this forum. So the good news is from this year onward, the survey will be conducted jointly by all 5 regional commissions and UNCTAD together. So we can further increase country coverage and integrate data from the UNCTAD NTFC database and other databases. So for planning and assessing where you stand on trade digitalization, which was a big focus of the work of a lot of the NTFCs, NTFCs can actually use one of our other tools, a new online interactive guide that is at digitalizetrade.org and developed by us with EIF and also UNCTRAL. So it has been used in 15 countries in Asia and the Pacific already to identify relevant legal and technical gaps. So we also have a number of free online self-paced courses available with certificates for those who pass the test, our difficult test. So we have a long-standing course on business process analysis, but also a more recent one on enhancing trade information portals and making them more sustainable. And we have a series of new modules on next generation trade facilitation that are also coming up later this year in collaboration with UNRCs and UNCTAD. So a lot of the tools mentioned above are very much linked to the framework agreement on border paperless trade in Asia and the Pacific. So this UN treaty complements the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement, and all NTFCs in the ESCAP region are very much encouraged to put it as part of their agenda to accelerate their country's accession to the treaty. The first implementation meeting is actually taking place in April this year. So the forum talked a lot about the need for cooperation and digitalization, and that is exactly what this treaty was designed for. So in terms of online events, I can mention the webinar series we launched during COVID-19 on accelerating cross-border paperless trade in Asia Pacific, together with the Asian Development Bank and the International Chamber of Commerce. We will continue having webinars as part of this series, and then you can also access the recordings, for example, on single window interoperability, which I think is of interest to many of you. Let me end by informing you that the 10th Asia Pacific Trade Facilitation Forum will be hosted in Singapore and by Singapore at the end of August this year, after being postponed several times. So if you want to learn more about good practices in Asia and the Pacific and ASEAN in particular, please plan on attending the forum. Feel free to contact us, the trade facilitation team at ESCAP. If you need more information, we will do.
Thank you very much, Jan Duval, who prepared this intervention with the different time zones. So pleased to see how he highlighted also the collaboration with UNCTAD in the survey and really the leading work ESCAP together with ECE and the regional commissions have been doing. Next speaker is our good old friend and also ex-UNCTAD colleague, which we will not hold against him, Dr. Said from the ITC, Chief of the Trade Facilitation and Policy for Business section of the International Trade Center in Geneva. He also served as Senior Technical Advisor on Trade and Transport Facilitation with UNCTAD. He has vast experience of working on trade facilitation issues at national, regional, and multilateral level. He also worked as lead negotiator for Pakistan in the WTO negotiations for trade facilitation. So anything we do not like in the agreement, it's Dr. Said's fault. He was a negotiator. His work experience over 15 years with Pakistan Customs has contributed towards his pragmatic approach based on the ground realities in the trade facilitation area. He has enriched his experience by working with many developing countries for identifying their TF needs assessments and developing their national implementation plans. Very happy to have you here and the collaboration for this event and for the collaboration over the years. Dr. Said, you have the floor.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you for your kind words. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, heads and members of National Trade Facilitation Committees, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of ITC's Executive Director and myself, and especially the Trade Facilitation team, I would like to extend our appreciation to all those who contributed to this event, namely the speakers for sharing their unique insights and perspectives, to country delegations and guests for taking the time to attend this event, to NTFC Global Forum partners for responding quickly to UNCTAD's call for contributions, and to our colleagues and partners from UNCTAD, especially led by Paul and Yen, for organizing this third edition of the NTFC Forum so swiftly at the end of turn of the year, despite the disruption caused by COVID and the end of year festivities. Once again, we successfully demonstrated the collaborative spirits amongst all the development partners in the area of trade facilitation. I would like to take this opportunity to reaffirm ITC's unwavering support to the NTFC Forum, like in the past. We now stand ready, once again, to work under the leadership of UNCTAD and other partners and plan the next edition in advance. One of the core principles of the NTFC Forum is to bring together diverse experiences from different region, countries, and individuals, to learn from best practices, to challenge the way we think, and to connect globally. As we collectively shape the agenda of our next forum, let's reach out even earlier and to a broader sector of trade community, public and private, from all continents and from all sectors, to benefit further from the diversity of NTFC's knowledge, practices, and innovation. to be truly global. Our beneficiaries told us that they were keen to take the floor, but could not. They could only post their comments and questions in chat box. We heard them all, as I think our colleagues from UNOG for excellent conference services, we would work with them to make the future editions more interactive. Ladies and gentlemen, you know the concept of National Trade Facilitation Body dates back to early 70s, when the first pro committees of Sweden and the UK were established, and we had the first NEC recommendation in 1974, the recommendation number 4. So to this extent, 60 years later, there's nothing new under the sun. So what makes NTFC so special? In my view, what makes NTFC so special is their ability to operationalize at a global scale the concept of multi-stakeholder public-private dialogue platforms responsible for shaping border environment in a consultative, coordinated, and inclusive manner. The entry responsibility, which Jan said, the Article 23.2 created this legal framework, but it is the practitioner, like participants to this forum, members of the NTFCs, who made it a reality by seizing the opportunity offered by the TFA to transform the manner in which trade facilitation reforms are designed, implemented, and monitored. Precisely, it was from a silo and often little inclusive and top-down approach to a practice whole of the supply chain and true private sector engagement. Dear participants, a wise man once told me, the reward of good work is more work. We have a collective responsibility to build up this achievement and empower these institutions further to make border environment even more conducive for businesses and contribute to addressing global challenges through trade. NTFCs over the last decades have been acknowledged as anchor of trade facilitation reforms. This is best examples of trade support institutions committed to harness trade for sustainable and inclusive economic development. ITC has a track record of spearheading technical assistance towards strengthening trade support institutions through dedicated tools, methodology, and expertise spread over last many decades. We stand ready to share our experience and work with the NTFC to strengthen those and make them more robust and responsive. Now, as we are looking towards the future, let me share with you over the last 4 days 5 takeaways which would shape the future work of the NTFCs. And please pardon me, because Elizabeth speaking has already mentioned this, so pardon if there is a repetition, but these are the key takeaway which would definitely impact how ITC works and, in my view, how all of us work in our respective mandates. The first such takeaway lesson is inclusion. Inclusion is essential if countries are to bridge economic, social, and environmental gaps. During the forum, we heard how SME and women are disproportionately affected by complex border formalities and how it constrains their economic empowerment. NTFC should encourage the design and implementation of SME-focused and gender-responsive reforms to create conducive cross-border environment for women traders. In this regard, let me share briefly that ITC is already training hundreds of customs and BRA officials to make their practices gender sensitive under our project in the Central Asia. We are supporting governments to collect trade-related gender disaggregated data, coaching women associations to advocate their needs in the NTFC, as well as creating safer and more conducive environment for women, small-scale cross-border trader through the dedicated trade facilitation schemes and the establishment of gender-sensitive infrastructure at border crossing points. Moving on, regional integration is the second key takeaway. Regional integration is at the center of many policy debates and will continue to shape international trade and economic relations. And one of the reasons of the impact of COVID is being discussed, that it is more contributing towards the regional value chains rather than the global value chains. The forum discussions emphasized how coordinated trade facilitation reforms at the regional level is crucial to reap the benefits of TFA and accompanying the regional integration journeys worldwide. Fostering the regional dimension of trade facilitation reform is at the core of ITC's work. Please have a look at ITC publication on charting a roadmap towards regional integration with the WTO trade facilitation agreements. We supported the regionalized implementation of reform, such as digitalized certificate of origin, regional trade facilitation portals, or cross-border procedural simplifications. We have and will continue to institutionalize regional mechanisms for coordinating and streamlining trade facilitation reforms, such as regional trade facilitation committees. Finally, we are working alongside countries and regional economic community to address holistically the entire spectrum of non-tariff barriers to trade that hinders regional integration process. African Continental Free Trade Area has accentuated the need of such an approach, and we are very pleased to work with them. We also heard the third takeaway on climate change and sustainable development. The transition to a green and environmentally sustainable economy is a defining challenge of our time. During the forum, we heard the call of participants using trade facilitation to catalyze policy action for sustainable development and environmental protection. This is an absolute necessity. We are also joining hands, efforts, and minds with the academia, business, and policymakers to find always innovative answer to such a complex global challenge, and NTFC must contribute to this also. Digitalization was the fourth area the participants advised us. Digitalization took a quantum leap during COVID, and this digital transformation will accelerate. E-commerce has already occupied a significant share of both domestic and cross-border trade, and this trend would continue to grow, and now the COVID has further accelerated its pace. The forum demonstrated how NTFC can play a role in fostering automation and digitalization of trade formalities. We are all working in this area and will continue harnessing digital solutions to cut the time and cost to trade, while enhancing the efficiency and effectiveness of border controls, be it TF portals, automation of licenses or certificate, or AI-based integrated risk management. Ladies and gentlemen, the fifth takeaway is of FDI. NTFC has come a long way since early 70s, and they will remain essential building blocks towards creating conducive environment for businesses and achieving the SDG. ITC is committed to support countries and regional economic communities in enhancing the capacity of trade facilitation committees to fulfill their mandate. As selected WTO member, continue negotiation on investment facilitation. I would like to stress the symbiotic relationship between trade and investment facilitation and the similarities in the respective goals of these two topics, improving the transparency and predictability, as well as reducing red tape costs associated with administrative procedures and requirement. These similarities may call for rethinking of broadening of NTFC mandates. I am confident that in a few years, the theme of Global Forum would be how trade and investment facilitation can contribute towards sustainable environment in the digital era in an inclusive manner. And I'm sure at that point of time, UNCTAD will continue to take the lead and will continue to support it. Thank you very much again.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Said. Glad we are shooting in the same direction. And if there's some repetition of what was said during these 4 days and what other panelists said, well, it would be surprising if we were contradicting each other. I mean, we have different focus. ITC, of course, is very much also for the SMEs, the private sector. EC is more on the standards, but it's really important to have all this together for those on the ground who have to implement. Thank you, Dr. Said. Let me move on then to the next panelist, which I believe has now joined us as well, which is Brendan O'Hearn. I hope I have pronounced this correctly. Brendan serves as the Deputy Director of the Compliance and Facilitation Directorate, in charge of the Procedures and Facilitation Subdirectorate at the WCO, World Customs Organization. Prior to this, Mr. O'Hearn served as both the US Customs and Border Protection Attaché and Department of Homeland Security Attaché in Tokyo, in Japan. He started his public service career with the US Customs Service in 1995 as an import specialist at John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York. Who knows if we have met him there already. Brendan, welcome to Geneva. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Jan. I greatly appreciate it. And given the incredible input already provided by the previous speakers, I'll try and keep my remarks short. We have really enjoyed the past 4 days that have clearly been devoted to fostering cooperation amongst all relevant stakeholders for the benefit of achieving the best possible results in facilitating cross-border trade. NTFCs play a critical role in strengthening border agency cooperation and public-private partnerships in particular. One important lesson we have learned is that they contribute significantly to mitigating any disruptions at the border, such as the ones we've experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic. These forums are a means of further enhancing these important dialogues, and the WCO will remain actively engaged in them. There were many takeaways, and each of the sessions focused on a particular aspect where NTFCs play a role, such as measuring and monitoring implementation of trade facilitation reforms, addressing emergency situations, such as the COVID-19 pandemic, but also any future crises, digitization of border procedures, promoting gender equality and trade facilitation policies, tackling emerging issues such as e-commerce. Another emerging issue where we see NTFCs playing an increasingly important role are on environmental issues. The WCO is focusing on green customs solutions and the circular economy, where partnership with other stakeholders, both other agencies and the private sector, will play a major role. I would also like to highlight the importance of gender equality and inclusion, which was an important theme of this forum. The WCO is making efforts to advance this agenda through, for instance, the establishment of a network for gender equality and diversity in customs, the adoption of the WCO Declaration on Gender Equality and Diversity in Customs, and also in our capacity building work, having launched various tools as well. Have joined forces in organizing Global NTFC Forum 2022. UNCTAD, GATF, ITC, OECD, UNEC, ESCAP, WBG, and the WTO. Through our Mercator program, the WCO remains committed to supporting the implementation of the TFA, including strengthening the NTFCs and cooperation with numerous relevant stakeholders. We look forward to seeing all of you again next year, and hopefully next time in person. Thanks very much, Jan.
Thank you, Brendan. Much appreciated. And also with WCO, of course, we have this joint project with United Kingdom, and also many years with our customs automation program, ASICUDA, of course, which implements your standards and recommendation. Very important, very good to have you here. We have to move on. So from Brussels, we move to Washington. Welcome to Geneva, Bill Gain, from the World Bank Group. He is the global leader for trade facilitation, customs reform, and border management within the World Bank Group's MTI Global Practice, where you lead the implementation of trade facilitation and border management reform in over 70 countries. Prior to joining the World Bank Group, Bill was Associate Director and Manager for New Zealand and the Pacific at the Center for Customs and Excise Studies at the University of Canberra. Prior roles also include just 30-year career with New Zealand Customs. Bill, welcome to Geneva.
Thank you very much, Jan. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. Firstly, I'd like to say a huge congratulations to UNCTAD for a seamless and very successful event over the last several days. Congratulations also to our colleagues from our Annex D and other partner organisations who co-sponsored this forum. The World Bank Group is very pleased to be part of what is a critical event for all countries at this particular time, specifically least developed countries and small island development states. The fact that many of you have joined us at these sessions across multiple time zones at often very inconvenient times is a testament to your commitment in improving the trade environment in your countries. The COVID-19 crisis has further underlined the importance of trade facilitation and efficient and coordinated border management. Disrupting billions of lives and livelihoods, the COVID-19 pandemic threatens decades of hard-won development gains and demands an exceptional response. The National Trade Facilitation Committee mechanism, public-private dialogue mechanism, is an exceptional and very much critical response to deal with such issues as the COVID-19 pandemic. As we approach the COVID-19 recovery phase, and I hope we're in it, we keep regressing a little, but we are moving forward, albeit incrementally. Trade facilitation is even more critical to ensure the efficient and effective distribution of vaccines, medical goods, and emergency products. As we have heard from many speakers over the last few days, having a public-private dialogue mechanism at the national and regional levels is critical to ensure the private and public sectors partner together to lead the implementation of the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement and related trade reforms. We have heard this week the success of NTFCs is dependent on many factors, including setting strategic priorities, ensuring effective decision-making, and monitoring and evaluation of country progress, which is crucial for the well-functioning of NTFCs. The NTFC must also take a whole-of-government approach and include all the relevant agencies and stakeholders involved in cross-border trade, including ensuring women-owned, led, and managed firms are included. Recent World Bank Group studies indicate there is a lack of awareness of NTFCs by women traders. Ensuring public sector and private sector capacity building is sufficient to ensure real and active dialogue, enabling the identification of constraints to efficient cross-border trade, and validating reform implementation benefits. A clear mandate and leadership role with a sequenced work plan and a mechanism to monitor and evaluate progress. Aligning to international standards like the UN ECE recommendation number 4 on NTFCs we heard about both today and also in the opening session. The actual creation of a National Trade Facilitation Committee can be very challenging, but the real work is in ensuring the committee is fully functioning and sustainable after it has been set up. Finally, this week we saw the importance of sharing experiences and learning from each other. I hope we can continue this partnership with UNCTAD and have this event again next year. As many of you already know, the Willbank Group provides support for TFA implementation through our flagship Trade Facilitation Support Program, or known as TFSP. Please reach out to me if we can provide additional support for your country programs. Once again, thanks to all the panelists from across the world for sharing your time and experience, and I really look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Thank you very much. Back to you, Jan.
Thank you, Bill, and thank the whole World Bank team. Big collaboration in a wide area of topics and countries. Always potential to do even more, so let's work on this. Good. Now, having spoken from about different agencies that help you, the participants, the NTFCs, to implement, and we spoke about the WTO. Why not ask the WTO? And here we have her, Sherry Rosenow, from the World Trade Organization. She is a customs attorney and a counselor at the WTO Market Access Division. Really happy to have you here, Sherry. We think you and Dr. Said and I, we are probably the oldest dinosaurs who have worked on this since the whole very beginning of the negotiations and now work on the implementation. You're right, you have been involved in the WTO trade facilitation since the negotiations began. You're currently responsible for the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement facility. Prior to joining the WTO Secretariat, Sherry Rosenow worked as an advisor on customs and WTO accession issues for US aid projects in Central Asia and the Middle East. She started her career on the commercial legal staff of the US Customs Service. Sherry, very good to be with you, have you still here in Geneva. You have the floor.
Thank you, Jan, from one dinosaur to another. Hello, everybody. It's nice to be with everyone again. And I would also like to start by commending UNCTAD for organizing another excellent forum. This week has been rich with information from many excellent presentations. It has given us all a lot to think about and a lot to take in. So all my colleagues that have spoken before me have raised so many important highlights and points, so I won't repeat any. So in these closing remarks, I would like to take this opportunity to highlight a few points raised earlier this week by the WTO Deputy Director General and the chair of the WTO Trade Facilitation Committee. So our Deputy Director Gonzalez recognized the vital role of the national committees to coordinate and oversee implementation of the Trade Facilitation Agreement. An important component of this leadership role is to ensure that all the border agencies are seeking and finding the support that they need to implement the provisions that they were notified in Category C. And she also called on development partners, international agencies, and NGOs to assist members, in particular the least developed countries, to build capacity, improve connectivity, and strengthen trade-related infrastructure. The chair of the WTO Trade Facilitation Committee, Mr. Christopher O'Toole, emphasized the importance of timely submission of the TFA required notifications and reminded LDCs of the August deadline for the Category C definitive implementation dates. He highlighted the fact that very few members have notified their donor and development partner arrangements as required under Article 16. However, the point I want to emphasize the most, a point that was made by both the DDG and the committee chair, is the fact that we are here to support you. All of our organizations are here, but at the WTO, both our WTO Secretariat colleagues that support the Trade Facilitation Committee and the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement Facility, or TFAF as it's known, are happy to assist all the members at any time, but more specifically, the TFAF can help to connect you with donors through our expression of interest. This is a first step in the TFAF grant application process, but you don't have to proceed to a grant. Through this expression of interest process, you can send information on the TFA articles for which you are seeking implementation support. We circulate this information to our extensive list of donors and development partners, including those here with us this week. And we have already helped 5 members to find implementation support for 57 provisions of the TFA. We believe this is an underused resource and would like to encourage more members to take advantage. And you can find full information on the TFAF website grant page. We are also happy to assist with the Article 16 notifications of donor arrangements. As Arantxa from UNCTAD said earlier this week, everybody likes data, but nobody wants to take the time to provide it. However, this notification could be a good way for you to inform donors of the Category C provisions for which you are currently and still seeking support. And for our LDC members, in the near future, TFAF will contact each of you to offer one-on-one online meetings, or perhaps they could be in person by then, we'll see, but to assist you to meet the August notification deadline. In closing, I look forward to our continued work together. Please do not hesitate to contact us when you need us. So thank you again to everyone for a wonderful week, and have a nice weekend.
Thank you very much, Cherie, and congrats on setting up the facility. Also, what you have not highlighted so much, but all the data that you have on the notifications, ratifications, what the member states provide to you, are a very rich source of data. Now, this is all what you receive, and you highlight the need for data. On our side, we complement this with our new and expanded repository on the NTFCs, and it's good also that we are not repeating questionnaires, bombarding our NTFCs with duplicated information, and we don't ask them about the notifications, because you have it, and we are your biggest fans using your data sets. Thank you, Cherie. So from Geneva, we move again out of Geneva to Paris. We have Ms. Silvia Sorescu as a policy analyst in the Emerging Policy Issues Division of the OECD, the Trade and Agriculture Directorate. Mrs. Sorescu is currently the project lead for the Directorate's trade facilitation work, which includes the OECD trade facilitation indicators, which we also like and use in our research. She is also working on developing the Directorate work stream linking digital trade and trade facilitation. Prior to joining the OECD, Silvia was a research associate at the World Economic Group, an academic research center at the Paris Institute of Political Studies, Sciences Po, Paris. So Silvia, virtually welcome to Geneva.
Thank you very much, Jan, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all distinguished participants connecting today to the closing session of the National Trade Facilitation Committees Global Forum. It is really hard to come after so many wonderful panelists, but as you said, Jan, I think repeating many of the issues shows that we all share many of the same goals in our work, and also the value of collaborating together. I can say it has been an incredible week, rich in experience sharing, learning from members of NTFC's policymaker as experts, and then other relevant stakeholders all around the globe on developments in NTFC's activities and on developments in implementing trade facilitation reforms. I wish to thank UNCTAD once again for allowing the OECD to be part of such a timely and relevant event. The themes covered throughout the forum are really a proof that trade facilitation is key in the current global context, and that the role of NTFCs in advancing the TFA and trade facilitation reforms more broadly is more important than ever. As an organization that is also working on trade facilitation, particularly through our work that you mentioned on the OECD trade facilitation indicators, we have also tried to absorb all the interesting and useful information shared this week by the NTFC's members and experts, and learn from best practices worldwide. As also mentioned by other panelists, it is really hard to fully do justice to all the rich discussions that we've been having throughout the week, as many key themes have been approached, from the role of NTFCs in mainstreaming digital trade facilitation solutions, to their role in e-commerce and promoting gender equality. And also, I think the more forward-looking approach that the forum has taken in trying to identify innovative ideas and approaches for NTFC's crisis preparedness as well, by taking stock of some of the lessons that we've learned from the COVID pandemic. And the latter, I think, is also a reminder of the fact that disruptions continue to affect the functioning of global supply chains. So making trade facilitation reforms is increasingly important in offsetting some of the time and cost increases that we see experienced by traders. So following all these interesting discussions throughout the week, I would just like to highlight 3 key takeaways and maybe also make 3 points of food for thought going forward. So as the 3 key takeaways, I think first, the different presentations and experience sharing from the members of NTFCs and then policymakers have highlighted, I think, the mind shift to more collaboration and cooperation and trade facilitation as we try to emerge from the COVID pandemic, hopefully. And interagency cooperation committees or task forces addressing COVID-19 border disruptions generally involved a wide range of government and private sector stakeholders, in many cases going beyond existing structures for border agency cooperation and public-private cooperation. And this would not have been possible without the efforts made previously on enhancing the capacities of structures such as NTFCs. A second key takeaway, I think, revolves around the importance of the institutional setting. And again, this has already been mentioned, but I think this really needed to assist NTFC's platforms in being strong and reliable coordination mechanisms, and also the multi-stakeholder public-private partnerships required in support of this. And we have learned extensively about the efforts that the many NTFCs have been doing in defining clear and holistic institutional frameworks while setting out clear strategic priorities and work plans. A last key takeaway, I believe, is the increasing need of having a whole of supply chain approach, particularly to digitalization and trade facilitation reform more broadly. I think in the poll of the last session this morning, we saw digitalization and e-commerce noted, I think, by almost 80% of participants as the key emerging priority in the trade facilitation space. So therefore, NTFCs, I think, are also trying to understand better how they can support traders and consumers in what has been called the paradigm shift for trade, and then navigating an increasingly complex regulatory environment. So now to go forward, I would just like to make maybe 3 points as more of a food for thought. So first, and this again has been approached in the forum, I think we do need to think of ways to ensure monitoring and progress of progress and challenges as a compass in devising and implementing trade facilitation reforms. I think measurement will be key in knowing where TF reforms need to be scaled up, what specific policies can be prioritized and better target resources, but also how best to devise a comprehensive approach to trade facilitation. This is an area where we're also trying to support implementation of the TFA and the work of NTFCs through the OECD trade facilitation indicators, which are covering today more than 160 economies since 2012. And we are currently updating them and trying as much as possible, of course, to draw already from the rich information that exists from the WTO, from UNCTAD, from the World Bank, from the WCO, or the United Nations Regional Economic Commission's Digital and Sustainable Trade Facilitation Survey. As it was pointed out during the forum, if you cannot measure progress and challenges in implementing trade facilitation reforms, well, then you cannot improve policies on the ground. And as also mentioned by other panelists, we monitor progress, not just for monitoring, but also to assess the impact of trade facilitation, be it impacts on trade costs, on trade flows, on MSMEs, or on e-commerce. And again, at the OECD, we will continue this year work using the OECD trade facilitation indicators to analyze the benefits of trade facilitation policies. And we will also continue work looking at how international cooperation and technical assistance through initiatives such as Aid for Trade can support developing countries in addressing some of these challenges. It will be really important to enhance and better target assistance and cooperation to close some of these gaps, including in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. Second, I think we need to think about the policy setting that is needed to embrace the digital transformation for improving processes, but also for collecting better information that can support measurement. And some of the previous panelists have mentioned really innovative and exciting initiatives, I think, in this space. And then throughout the forum, virtually all interventions have noted the role of digital in improving border processes and exploiting new opportunities like cross-border e-commerce. But we also see many of the challenges mentioned in terms of the digital divide or the fragmented digital regulatory environment. So digitalization of trade processes will mean looking at automation of customs and other border agency processes, but it will also mean e-signatures and contracts, invoices and payments that can help us keep up with e-commerce developments and maximize the benefits. And third and last, I think we need to think inclusiveness, resilience, sustainability really as integral parts to trade facilitation reforms. Strategies and policies are needed to support MSMEs, women entrepreneurs to reach markets or access inputs against a background where issues now such as resilience of supply chain and environmental sustainability are becoming key dimensions to the global economy setting and to achieving sustainable development goals. And again, we have learned from some of the presentations that trade facilitation's role should not be underestimated in its potential to support resource efficient and circular economy transition. So we really need to think as well how trade facilitation can live up to its full potential in these areas. So to wrap up, in the OECD will continue to support open trade and transparency by providing research, supporting open markets, including through its evidence-based tools, and aiming to guard against disruptions in supply chains, which are key to sustainable and inclusive growth. Global challenges require global solutions, and NTFCs are definitely key to designing these solutions. We look forward to working with UNCTAD and all other partners to support economies and NTFCs and really ensuring that no country is left behind in the realization of the benefits that trade facilitations reform can bring. I will finish out by saying congratulations once again for a very successful and interactive event, and thank you once more for the kind invitation to the OECD to be a partner. I also look forward to seeing you all very soon. Thank you, Jan. Back to you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you very much for being here, for the partnership, also for the data you provide, which we have used for different studies, which very nicely shows the chicken and egg challenge, where you see that countries that are less developed also find it more difficult to implement trade facilitation reforms. At the same time, the more we help those countries, the more this helps them to develop faster. Could be a long, fascinating discussion. Also, the statistics you had on aid for trade showed, at least the last time I looked at them, that middle-income countries, among the funds they receive, actually receive a higher share, percentage-wise, for trade facilitation. While for the very, very poorest, our area of work competes with health, education, very basic emergency support. And of course, our task is to help, especially and focus on the NTFCs, trade facilitation in the weakest economies. Anyhow, I'm only the moderator. Thank you, Sylvia. We move on to last but not least, Paul Hansen from UNCTAD. Paul is currently the chief of the trade facilitation section at UNCTAD. He has extensive experience in the area of trade and transport facilitation, having worked for almost 20 years in the UN system on issues such as international trade, transportation, development, international standards, previously working at the UNECE as secretary for the TIR and harmonization conventions. Prior to joining the UN, Paul worked for more than 10 years in the private sector in areas such as public affairs, management consulting, logistics with organizations including Ernst & Young, Freight Forwarders Europe, the International Road Transport Union, IRU, who are also here among us in this meeting, and the Ziegler Group. Very good to have Paul in this meeting, and very good to have Paul with us in UNCTAD. Paul, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Jan, and good afternoon from Geneva to everyone. Let me first congratulate the participants in this forum for your attendance and your active participation, which has made the forum a success. 1,300 registered participants have. The discussions have been very interesting, including the networking sessions where participants have had the chance to discuss the challenges and good practices of NTFCs and to link up. The director of UNCTAD's division on technology and logistics at the opening session called the participants doers. And I would like to add that from our experience, NTFCs and NTFC members can be real change makers for trade reforms. Now, let me also thank the excellent panelists and moderators. We are very grateful that we have been able to have a large number of practitioners from NTFCs as panelists, presenting and sharing their experiences. We believe that it is an important role of this forum to share knowledge and good practices. I also take this opportunity to thank our partners, many of whom have just spoken, from the international organizations. Many NTFCs work with these organizations as well as with other donors in implementing trade facilitation reforms in their countries. The international organizations have many useful tools and solutions. And in UNCTAD, we are very pleased that the forum also shows the collaboration between the international organizations and how we can work with to assist NTFCs. Now, I would particularly like to thank my colleagues in UNCTAD, especially the Trade Facilitation Section colleagues, for their dedicated work and preparation. The forum could their important work. I also thank other UN colleagues for their valuable assistance. Operating in this virtual environment is a new experience, even after 2 years of the pandemic, but I hope that the forum has appeared well organized and running smoothly for the participants' point of view. I think it was Stephen Pope from DHL that this morning mentioned that with the new virtual environment that COVID-19 has forced upon us, we see participation from all over the world in these kind of events, something that has not always been the case in the past. In fact, I would dare to say that the virtual environment makes the international exchange even more democratic. Everybody can participate. And for the prosperity of all is one of UNCTAD's main objectives. And forums like this can certainly assist in meeting this objective. In terms of UNCTAD's work, I've been very proud to see presentations and interventions from many of our partner countries of the tools and solutions that we provide in the field of trade facilitation, including some of the following. First, the launch of the revamped online database for NTFCs, which now includes more functionalities, including sustainability score and comparative tools. And this is something that NTFCs can benefit from and can visit to gain more information and more knowledge. Secondly, our empowerment and e-learning program for National Trade Facilitation Committees and for regional bodies, which provides these with both substantive learning modules on trade facilitation and also training on how to run successful NTFCs. Furthermore, the successful rollout of the Trade Facilitation Reform Tracker in about 20 countries, which provides NTFCs with a professional and monitoring tool for trade facilitation reforms. Digital tools are crucial to advancing trade facilitation reforms, and this has been provide transparency of trade facilitation regulation and procedures, which can be centralized and displayed successfully, for instance, using UNCTAD's trade information portals, which provide stakeholders not only with an intuitive access to information, but also provides NTFCs and governments with a tool to implement simplification of trade facilitation procedures. Finally, I wish to mention some of our other tools, such as our transit coordination training module, our gender and trade facilitation training module for NTFCs, which is increasingly important in order to ensure gender mainstreaming in trade facilitation. Very importantly, our rapid scans of national trade facilitation environments in times of crisis, the UNCTAD ASECUDA program to digitalize customs and trade procedures, and finally, our recent work on trade facilitation and climate change, which I believe will be important for the future and the future work of NTFCs. UNCTAD is ready to continue this work with our existing partners and with new partner countries. And this mandate has recently been confirmed and even strengthened during the UNCTAD 15 conference based in Barbados, and where UNCTAD members asked UNCTAD to further enhance our work in trade facilitation. We want to continue to be collaborative and innovative in our approach to trade facilitation implementation. We are very thankful that our partner countries, and equally thankful to our donors for enabling us to continue this work. We also thank you, the participants of this forum, for your inputs, and we encourage you to continue to communicate with us on the needs that you see in implementing trade facilitation reforms. Now, in this context, we will now launch the last poll of this forum, which you will see on your screen, and which I would like to encourage you to reply to. UNCTAD is planning to launch a network for NTFCs and NTFC members to continuously ensure that the networking and knowledge has facilitated can also continue after the forum. We plan to launch this network, which we tentatively can call the NTFC Hub, as soon as possible. And you can certainly contribute by realizing this with voting in this poll in order that we can see the actual interest. The NTFC Hub will invite all NTFCs and their members to join. Our vision is to bring the NTFC community together to facilitate trade globally, regionally, and nationally. We will focus on inclusiveness, openness, and quality participation. The Hub will facilitate cooperation and dialogue between NTFCs, including both public and private stakeholders. It will foster cooperation between NTFCs and link to such empowerment and e-learning platforms and other tools. And therefore, we will also invite our partners from the international organizations to join the Hub, as well as our donor partners, who we hope will support this initiative. So now we can maybe see the result of the poll, and I'm quite pleased to see that there is a 98% interest out of those that have voted for the poll in joining such an initiative. So I think the launch of the initiative can certainly be something that we will follow up, and that we will follow up in the near future. So we hope that the initiative will be well received, and we will reach out to you and to the NTFCs very soon in order to launch the initiative and in order for you to join. Finalizing my intervention, I wish also to mention that UNCTAD is committed to the dialogue amongst NTFCs by organizing more forums in the future. We hope we'll be able to meet in person during the next forums, but having in mind the success and democratic nature of the virtual environment. Other forums on the next forums will likely be organized as hybrid events. And we look forward to your active participation also in the future. So now that the forum comes to an end, I think we can allow the Olympic Winter Games to start. Thank you very much, and stay safe.
Thank you very, very much, Paul. We still have 4 or 5 minutes for some concluding thoughts, and I had received from you and the amazing trade session team the summaries of the different sessions. It would be too long to go through all of these, but I do want to certainly reiterate huge thanks to the whole team, concluding the session, to you, Paul, for leading the TF team, and you and the team reaching out, cooperating, coordinating, and you have seen there's a sincere spirit of collaboration. The whole topic of trade facilitation could not live without working together. It's a pleasant environment. We are not competing like some other industry sectors would probably be competing. In a way, this type of forum, and also be it the Annex D group, be it the GFP, be it UN groups, we have to be a good example and show that we also work together. Just as in the NTFCs, you work together between private sector and public sector, between the users and the providers, the smaller companies, the bigger companies, trade and finance. All these have to work together to if I were to summarize in 3 key points, the summary points that I've seen and I've heard today, I would go like past, present, future. So the article in the TFA that covers the National Trade Facilitation Committees was actually the first one in the long negotiating text. And some of you will remember, Cherie will remember, Said will remember, that did not have squared brackets. It was the first one where there was consensus. Now, there's an agreement, it's a win-win. And this came, I think we can be proud to say that this first draft was submitted by a group of Latin American countries who had worked with UNCTAD in establishing and creating NTFCs in their countries. And already in 1994, UNCTAD had a huge trade efficiency conference forum, out of which trade facilitation became one of the Singapore issues. So there was a long story of trade facilitation as a carrot, like it's good for you. And now the WTO TFA added to this stick, the obligation. That's one step back. Today, several have mentioned it again, and also the polls that we did this morning. What are the key issues, future challenges? Digitalization was mentioned. And this has come to the forefront in the pandemic. We have seen our own ways of working, your ways of working, the NTFCs, but also many of the reforms that we have been pushing for decades about digitalization, electronic payments, single windows, customs automation, pre-arrival processing, risk management, paperless e-signatures, and so on and so forth. They have received a push during this horrible pandemic, because people who may have been a bit more reluctant and still wanted to touch each other in paper have realized paperless solution, digital are not that bad. So one way I like to put this is, we now have to lock in the progress made during lockdown. So there is some progress that has been made. We have to lock in this progress. Now into the future, one could fear that at some point in time, every measure in the WTO TFA will be category A. Then we all are done and closed down and have done. No. Now, it may sound funny if I tell this to family and friends. I have a favorite article in the Trade Facilitation Agreement, Article 10.1. That's my favorite article. This will still be relevant in 100 years from now, because it does not say you must do X, Y, Z, you must introduce an advanced ruling, a single window, this or that. No, it says you must continuously revise, review, improve, find the most efficient, the least trade distorting solution. And to do this continuously, we need functioning NTFCs. With this, I conclude. I think we will still see the live drawings that have been done during this session, the previous sessions. So we will put some background music. I will not close the meeting yet. We will just stay here. I switch off the camera and microphone, but we'll stay on looking to this amazing moving pictures. And I wish all of you a wonderful weekend and looking forward to many more opportunities of collaboration, and good luck. Thank you all very much.